So, Assalamu alaikum everyone. So, today we're going to start from cortisol. We were on endocrine physiology modules. So, let's get started. What's the source of this hormone cortisol? We all know that it's a stress hormone and it is released by the adrenal zona fasciculator. Remember that G, F, R. So, G was glomerulosa secreting mineralocorticoids, F was fasciculator releasing this glucocorticoids, which is a cortisol. So, the other thing is that the function of it, right? It basically increases. There are various functions of it, and they are very high yield and important. So remember that it increases appetite, right? Then it increases blood pressure, right? How it basically upregulates alpha 1 receptors present on the arterioles, right, which will increase sensitivity to norepinephrine and epinephrine, and this is its permissive action, right? So thereby increasing blood pressure. Now at very high concentrations of cortisol, it can even bind to mineralocorticoid, that is aldosterone receptors, right? So cortisol also exhibit some of the effect of aldosterone as well. Remember this, right? Because in scenario they can say that the patient is also complaining of hypertension and the serum potassium levels are low, which are the functions of aldosterone. So yes, the other features would be consistent with cortisol. So overall cortisol hormone would be the right option. Okay, next comes the it also causes increased insulin resistance. It is a diabetogenic hormone. Now in the comment section you guys have to tell me that which other one hormone was also there which was diabetogenic. I previously have all told you, right? So it increases gluconeogenesis, lipolysis and proteolysis, breakdown of lipids and proteins. On the other hand, making new glucose because it's an emergency, or you can say stressful condition and situation, and you need more glucose to fight. And the utilization of the glucose will be decreased, but the new glucose will be formed. Right. Then comes it decreases fibroblast activity. That is, people having increased cortisol would have a poor wound healing, decreased collagen synthesis, and increased triads, as seen in the Cushing's syndrome, as we'll discuss in the pathology section. It decreases inflammatory and immune responses, right? How? By inhibiting the production of leukotrienes and prostaglandins, number one, by inhibiting WBC's adhesion, right? This is one step we'll learn in pathology, how the migration and adhesion of WBCs occurs in cases of inflammation. So it inhibits this WBC adhesion, leading to neutrophilia, like neutrophils will be raised in the blood, right? Remember this point as well. This comes in MCQ that the patient is having neutrophilia. So in the whole that long scenario, the answer would be increased cortisol, that is Cushing syndrome, if the neutrophilia would be much high. So blocks histamine release from mast cells, so eosinopenia and lymphopenia, like eosinophils and lymphocytes, these blood cells would be decreased, right, while neutrophils will be increased. So remember these 2 points, these are very high yield points. It also blocks IL-2 production, interleukin-2 production, right? So it decreases bone formation, that is osteoblast activity would be decreased, right? Now the side things, like this cortisol basically bind to CBG, that is corticosteroid binding globulin, and to remember these functions, there's a mnemonic, a big fib. Cortisol has got a mnemonic, a big fib. All of these are basically the first letters and you can remember it. Other than that, exogenous glucocorticoids you'll give exogenously if that can cause reactivation of TB. Like many of the quacks are giving the steroids for a longer period of time, so they can cause reactivation of TB, which is latent at that time, and also can lead to fungal infections like candidiasis by blocking IL-2 production. So mechanism you need to remember, right? And you need to see this one. This is basically regulation. First of all, you can actually see that the hypothalamus is basically secreting what? It is secreting CRH, cortical releasing hormone, and then stimulating anti-pituitary to release what? ACTH. Okay, now this ACTH along with that of MSH and endorphins, I already have told you why, and they cause hyperpigmentation, right? And these three are the derivatives of pro-opiomelanocortin, right? And this now ACTH has got positive effect on the adrenal cortex, releasing glucocorticoids, that is cortisol, and downstream cortisol function, right? Okay, so this all is you need to remember also the feedback mechanism. This increased cortisol would then inhibit the anterior pituitary along with that of hypothalamus. Negative feedback effect, right? I already told you all this. The chronic stress may induce prolonged corticosteroid cortisol secretion, cortisol resistance, and then impaired immunocompetency, and the whole HPA axis, hypothalamus pituitary axis, will be dysregulated in patients with chronically taking stress, right? Okay, so some of the side MCQs, like for FCPS, hormone released during stress is ACTH, right? And then also released earliest in stress, the one which is released earliest is CRH, right? The cortisol causes eosinopenia, right? Exogenous steroids, when given, they will cause reactivation of TB and candidiasis. Also, steroids cause decreased peripheral glucose uptake, right? This thing, glucose, decreased glucose utilization. Lipocortin would be increased, that will lead to that will inhibit PLPA2. This is the mechanism of action of it. Will study in detail. Then comes the most important thing for initiation of labor is fetal cortisol, right? So these were some of the MCQ which are important related to cortisol topic. Also, this cortisol causes intrahepatic protein anabolism, like making of that protein, while all other else okay, then comes these appetite regulation. So it is done by three basically hormones. Number one is ghrelin, then leptin, then endocannabinoids, right? The ghrelin, okay, so you need to remember ghrelin, hungry, right? It stimulates basically hunger. It is orexigenic effect, and growth hormone release also it causes, right, via the growth hormone secretagogue receptors. It is produced by stomach, right? And which of the following things increases its production? The sleep deprivation, and in case of fasting, obviously it stimulates hunger now, so fasting. In case of Prader-Willi syndrome, its production is increased, so it makes you hungry. It acts on the lateral area of hypothalamus, which is the hunger center basically, to increase appetite. So also this is an MCQ, that which area or nucleus of hypothalamus? The lateral one, right? Then comes leptin. It's for puberty and weight gain. It's a satiety hormone, the opposite of ghrelin, and it is produced by what? Adipose tissue. The upper one was by stomach. So mutation of leptin gene will lead to severe obesity, right? So the people who are obese, they will have increased leptin due to increased adipose tissue, obviously, right? But they are resistant to leptin's and orexigenic effect. Then the things which will decrease its production would be sleep deprivation or starvation. Obviously, in that case, your other hormone, that is ghrelin, would be increased. The sleep deprivation would increase ghrelin. Okay, then comes endocannabinoids. They will act at cannabinoid receptors in the hypothalamus and nucleus accumbens. These are the two key brain areas for the homeostatic control of food intake, and in turn, obviously, it increases appetite, right? So yeah, we need to remember like this, right? Then comes the signaling pathways of endocrine hormone. These are very high yield topics. So starting from cyclic AMP, so you need to remember this mnemonic. I also remember this flat champs shock. Okay, so FSH, LH, ACTH, TSH, CRH, HCG, then the ADH का V2 receptor, right? MSH, PTH, calcitonin, histamine का H2 receptors, two receptors of both, right? Second receptors. Glucagon and GHRH. The underlying ones were repeatedly asked in MCQs, right? Cyclic GMP pathway. So this thing. You can easily remember this: nitric oxide, BNP, ANP. There's just three hormones by cyclic GMP pathway. Then comes IP3 and PLPC. So GnRH, so by goat hag. GnRH oxytocin, ADH ka V1 receptors, right? H1 receptors for histamine, also angiotensin 2 and gastrin. So important MCQ was asked about TRH. So it is being done by IP3 mechanism, that is inositol phosphate 3 mechanism, and PLPC also, right? Sometimes come phospholipase C. They both are the same thing. This is enzyme. So then comes the intracellular receptors. So the intracellular receptors, like which will cross the membrane, cell membrane, and act within the cell, right? They include these: PET-CAT in TB. I remember this while all the adrenocortical hormones and vitamin D. So vitamin D plus adrenocortical hormones includes aldosterone, cortisol, and the stress hormones, sex hormones, estrogen and testosterone and progesterone, right? So like this, vitamin D plus adrenal cortex ke hormones all make intracellular receptors. Then receptor tyrosine kinase. This is mainly by insulin, right? It's very important, by MAP kinase pathway. and IGF, insulin like growth factor 1, FGF, fibroblast growth factor, and this one, platelet derived growth factors. All the growth factors plus insulin are by tyrosine kinase receptor. Then the non-receptor tyrosine kinase activity are only two, growth hormone and prolactin. So you need to remember this. Along these, some other like GCSF, colony stimulating factors, erythropoietin, thrombopoietins, right? Other some kind of immunomodulators like cytokines, IL-2, IL-6, interferon gamma. So all of these things, right? And they basically do this by which pathway? JAK-STAT pathway. The upper one was insulin by MAP kinase pathway. So you need to remember these two things. And this is non-receptor tyrosine kinase activity, which means that the receptor does not have intrinsic activity, right? So JAK-STAT pathway, right? So what's the general mechanism now? Signaling pathways of steroid hormone. You can see this hormone. Some of the receptors are present inside, and some of the receptors are present within the nucleus, and they make messenger RNA within the nucleus, and then protein is formed, and then the response results. So steroid hormones are basically the ones which are lipophilic, and therefore they must circulate bound to specific binding globulin, which increases their solubility. So they have got the receptors inside the nucleus, steroid hormones. In males, increased sex hormone binding globulin will lower the free testosterone. Obviously that will bind more, and the free levels would be decreased, leading to gynecomastia, while in females it would be decreased, raises the free testosterone, leading to hirsutism. Increase estrogen, for example OCP's pregnancy states, there would be increased steroid hormone binding globulin, right? So this was all about the physiology part. Next we'll start the pathology module of this endocrinology. So yes, stay tuned. Yeah, hope you understand well. Share with your friends and subscribe my channel. Thank you so much.